Well, welcome to the Church Office podcast.
My name's Gavin Smith, and if you're joining us on video, then here's a little wave.
We're excited to have Nigel Ring join us.
I've never actually heard the word wicked and accountant put in the same sentence.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Church Office podcast. My name is Gavin Smith, and it's a joy to welcome you if you're here listening for the first time, and thanks for being here. We are a church administration podcast. We love all the stuff that happens behind the scenes, and hopefully our podcast reflects some of the topics and aspects of our work that we do in admin and operations. So today's special guest is Andy Bagwell from UCAN. And he's a church consultant, has got loads and loads of experience. And we are going to be chatting about healthy church cultures, looking after staff. Andy's passionate about this area, aren't you, mate?
I am, yeah. It's what I live for at the moment.
And Andy does training all over the country and, works with teams, wants to get the best out of teams. So a great topic to kind of, kick off the podcast with and to chat further about. Andy, give us a bit of background. And you've started a new HR support service with UCAN. We want to go into some of the details of that and give churches information about how they can get involved and use the service. But your passion for people to work at churches, to have a good experience. How are churches generally doing in this whole area? What have you come across in your your experience?
I mean, probably brace for the answer. It's not pleasant hearing, although it may not be too surprising. Churches don't do so well at the sort of staff management, staff care, being a good and effective employer sort of task, really. I mean, I've noticed that over sort of 20 years of working for churches now, but increasingly so. I think the sort of the blip on the horizon that was COVID, which brought such disruptions to the way that we actually work as church staff teams, actually made a whole bunch of fault lines come to the forefront. And what we noticed supporting a number of churches through the last few years was a sense of while it was business as normal and they could get around each other at not quite at the water cooler. Not many churches have water cooler, but around the morning coffee break or while they could see each other. Things were sort of bubbling along okay, but actually when they hit a time of significant pressure or stress, had to move to remote working, had to throw in all sorts of extra hours to get things worked, and actually there's sort of fault lines in terms of what's my place on the staff team, what's my value, why don't I know about things now? All of those sorts of operational stuff came to the forefront. And actually what we see on a national scene is a lot of people have moved on from their staff roles over the last few years.
It is so, yeah, so true. And I'm grateful for all the church administrators out there who are playing a part to try and help and change this culture. And I remember, when I first came into post 20 years ago, there were no contracts, there were no, handbooks, there were no clear guidelines of, how we're going to support you in your work. And I think it's probably because a lot of our work has come from a voluntary basis, isn't it? It hasn't had employment. So we've had pastors who have been employing people into roles who really don't have the expertise and the knowledge to do it. And I guess that's kind of what I've come across. And we're seeing a lot more operation and administrative roles in place now. And that's a healthy thing, isn't it? To add to getting this and getting churches, employing people and looking after people better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm never one for putting extra administration around stuff for the sake of it. I mean, my career was in church administration. I am a big administration fan. Believe me, it's essential for the health of the church. But we don't do it just for the sake of it. We don't introduce management roles for the sake of it. We do it because there are people who need to be looked after and cared for, and do we want the experience of working for the church to feel more professional and more like the secular world? In some respects, yes, because actually some secular employers manage to create a much better sense of certainty with their employees about how things work. They manage to handle their progression, their development, their evaluation and review, their remuneration, in all sorts of ways, which are actually, leave some people going, that's a good employment experience.
Yeah.
And we certainly want to have those aspects present in the church. What we don't want to do is move too far away from the fact that this is also, it's a spiritual calling. We're doing it as family, and we're doing it in a sense of strong relationship as well.
Yeah. And I think every church has got an example, haven't they, where something's gone wrong with a staff member, and someone's painfully left, or just been upset by it, and that is a true reflection, and that does happen, and I guess we have to be intentional and strive to be better, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about that on the podcast. Andy, when you go into a church to offer some training about creating healthy organizations, where do you start? What do you do and straight away?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a number of different ways to approach it, and actually, I mean, I suppose one of the most recent experiences is my colleague Jules and I were up in a church in the Midlands running line management training for a staff team there, sort of a fairly larger staff team, who had identified again that they wanted to be effective in managing their team well, and actually they identified that a lot of the people that they asked to take on the management of another team member, they've never been trained in it. They have no idea what's going on. You spoke earlier about often pastors, senior pastors of churches, they may not have had management training as part of their theological training. Some of them bring a secular understanding of it from a former career. But equally, it's common in churches for a youth worker to manage an intern. Have we actually given them the tools to do that? So Jules and I were up running this day-long course on line management training, and actually as part of that, we look at the sort of foundational elements of if you're going to do line management one-to-one meetings with your staff, in what sort of context is that? Is it clear in the organisation when and where the decisions are made? What times of the year you like to plan in, and what times of year you like to evaluate and reflect on? How clear is the vision? How do you relate the understanding of the vision to what you actually want your staff team to do on a weekly basis? And then you sort of get into the realms of, and the amount of time that you give your staff to do that work. Is it sufficient for what you ask them to do, and have they got the right balance between the elements which are sort of the day job, the updating the records, making the building right, printing the notice sheets, all of those elements, to the particular project work that you might ask them to do to move the church's vision forwards. And what we often find is, you can say, I'm going to do line management really well, but if some of those sort of fundamentals about clarity of vision, cohesiveness of team, shared purpose, understanding of roles and responsibilities are not in place, then actually, the line management is sort of like putting a sticky plaster on something which actually needs a slightly more fundamental rework.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was listening to a podcast where somebody else was saying about having like a kind of line management structure and having a team plan of where people fit and where there's kind of authority and roles and management. And most people kind of shy away from wanting to have a proper kind of formatted diagram of where everything flows. But this podcast was really putting across the fact that actually people like to know where they fit. They like to know who they're reporting to. They like to have that real clarity of what part am I playing in delivering the vision that we're all building around, that we're all wanting to kind of grow and move towards. Yeah. And it was fascinating because we've always kind of not had a diagram and thought, right, we don't want it to look hierarchy, we don't want it to flow like that. But actually they were putting together saying, this is a really positive thing. People actually really appreciate it. And it's interesting.
I think boundaries and clarity are actually freeing and freedom, not restrictive. So the majority of people that I speak to on church staff teams like to understand how I fit into this, what's expected of me. And one of the sort of big models for management that I've studied over the last few years, which is called the 4 disciplines of execution. It comes out of American secular consultancy called Franklin Covey, really talks about creating a winnable game for people.
Yeah.
You know, whenever we sit down to play a board game, I don't know about you, if I sit down to play a board game, I want to know that I've got a chance of winning it. If I'm playing it with my wife as a team, she desperately wants us to win it. So it's all about having a scenario which, you know, by the end of the process, we can have enjoyed it, but actually achieve something. And I think that's what people want in the work situation. And again, churches sometimes, you know, err away from that because they think, I don't want to be micromanaging the person. I don't want it to feel too secular. But actually, that lack of clarity means that they're not certain of what's expected of them, and because of that, sometimes they don't even feel equipped or engaged to be able to achieve anything.
Yeah.
I had this wonderful conversation with a really great vicar of a church who was talking to me about their management style, and you know, they were very trusting of their team, really didn't want to engage too much in providing a specification or setting up micromanaging them. Didn't even meet too often with them. You know, I trust them. I want to allow them to get on with their job. They're here because they're called to do it, and that's absolutely great. When I sat and spoke with their team, the reality, you know, they were saying is, we feel a bit isolated. We don't really know what's wanted of us. We don't know what they think it looks like to do administration well, or to do children's ministry well, or etc. And actually, we need more of that specification. So, you know, the manager was thinking, if I go too much in on that, they're going to feel micromanaged and not trusted. The team was actually going, we need more from you on this. So that we can do this well, and it's often that mismatch between intention and outcome which sort of gets us into a problem in the world of staff management, I think.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think he makes a really good point. Yeah, I met a pastor who was wanting to be hands off, and same kind of outworking. What the staff really needed was them to put their hands on a bit more, and to bring clarity. So, you know, if you are listening to the podcast as a pastor or in a kind of senior role within a church, and you are managing people, then it's good to take some time and just to kind of reflect on what is my style of leadership. What am I doing? How am I supporting? How am I communicating to my staff? How am I helping to meet their needs, and encourage them as well in what they're doing, and create those kind of safe places and those clear boundaries. I think that's great. And if you're experiencing that as a church administrator, then take the opportunity as well to thank your line manager for the difference that they are making. I think sometimes you can be sat in the other seat going, I don't know how I'm doing, and so some feedback and stuff I think is useful. So go and thank them if that's the case as well. So, Andy, tell us about this. There's obviously two aspects to HR, isn't there? And you know, we've got the kind of formal side of what we need to meet in terms of our governance, in terms of our, you know, contracts, job descriptions, and all of that. And then we've got the other side of getting the best out of people and making folk feel like they're part of it, and vision and everything else, and linking into that. Let's go to the first part then, the kind of legal side, what we need to have in place. I think churches have stepped up the game on this a lot more, but you know, as a church administrator, we are spinning lots of plates. So I'm certainly not an expert in HR. I've got experience because I've done it for so long, but you know, those really definitive points when a trustee's saying, are you sure we've got this nailed? You know, is there a percentage of doubt? There is, because I know how things move on. I know how things change, and I'm not an expert. So it is, the whole area of HR for churches is a bit of a challenge. Give us a little bit of help then on that side of things.
Yeah. I think it's the complexity, or the perceived complexity around HR, which you know, often causes administrators or ops managers to feel a bit wary and a bit out of their depth with it. And in reality, you know, there is the sort of list of absolute essentials must-have boxing exercise is quite small, and you know, in the same way that, if you have a conversation with someone about church health and safety or risk management, you really want to walk away with a complete list of, have these 9 things in place and you are fine.
Yeah.
That's fine unless you need to manage an aspect of risk beside that. So the HR is a bit like that. You've already mentioned sort of employment contracts. The UK legislation enforces the fact that when someone starts in an employed role, they need to have a written statement of terms of employment. That's an absolute essential. Churches are a lot better than that than they used to be. Most churches operate in that way. Not all of them do. We still come across some that don't. But in reality, you need that written statement of terms, and there's all sorts of pro formas and templates available for that. We have them in our service. That's very easy sort of to put together. Equally, a really clear job description is massively helpful. I always recommend that churches make their job descriptions non-contractual. By non-contractual, I purely mean that they're outside of the employment contract, the statements of terms, and therefore they're a live document. They can be amended. Because again, the number of churches we go into where you look at a job description which is 12, 13, 14 years old. Does this bear any relation to what you do now? Oh no, not at all. Employment contract, statement of terms, job descriptions, sort of really essential place to start with. And obviously in an employed role, you then need to think about the mechanism for how you're going to remunerate the person, pay the person, and give them a written record of their pay and their tax deducted by PAYE and any pension contributions that are in place. Those are sort of the core essentials to start with. Besides that, you need to put in place anything which actually makes it clearer for the person as to how things work, and gives you a clear mechanism or procedure to follow when things don't work well. Now that can be a combination of making sure that they have a really good induction on the first day, when first 2-3 days of work, to help them realize how computer systems and keys and hours and booking annual leave and all of that sort of stuff works. Then it's making sure that there are appropriate policies in place. Some of the statutory policies about maternity leave or annual leave, parental leave, etc., need to be in place so that you're not making it up on from scratch every time that one of these situations comes around. And then in addition to that, things like disciplinary policies or complaints policies or grievance policies, all those sorts of elements where from time to time, and it does happen in churches, and we'd be naive to think it doesn't, something goes wrong and you need the best way to go through. Much better to have the policies in place in advance rather than again have to create those from scratch. As always with those sorts of areas, any of the sort of compliance side of employment, the ACAS website is a really helpful website. And although ACAS isn't a statutory body, lots of UK legislation says whatever you put in place needs to comply with the ACAS Code of Conduct. So that's a sort of a really crucial resource to get to.
Yeah, and this is a good time now to introduce, isn't it, the HR service that you're providing, because you can provide the templates and the confidence and what churches need at a very reasonable price. Give us a little bit of that. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that service, because.
So the service we launched a year or so ago is called churchworkers.net. It quite nicely mimics our UCAN website of churchadministrators.net. This is churchworkers.net. So it's run out of UCAN, the UK Church Administrators Network, but it's to service the HR support needs of anyone who works for the church. It came out of quite a number of years of conversations, and we were talking with some of our friends at the National Charity Stewardship, who do lots of work on governance and finance with churches, with some of our employment solicitors friends, Anthony Collins solicitors and Keeley solicitors in particular. And we were having a conversation to say, we think there's something missing at the moment for churches. You know, through my consultancy work, I've worked with dozens of churches, some of whom had no external HR support, and were either sort of head in the sand, nothing's going to happen to us, and you know, see how it works, to those who were paying for a secular provision of HR support, and actually not really getting particular value for money or an understanding of how it works in the church, to those who really spent no money on it until something went wrong, and then started dropping thousands on solicitors' fees. And I thought, you know, this isn't good stewardship of resource for the church, and the people are, you know, involved in this are just not being treated well. If it's the managers, they feel, you know, like they've got imposter syndrome, out of their depth. You know, apparently I'm responsible for HR, but I've got no idea what I'm doing. If it was the employees, they were feeling, oh, you know, my employer doesn't know what they're doing. You know, this isn't going to go well for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we had this conversation to say, what, you know, what could we put together? And after, you know, quite a long time of discussion, we got to the stage where where the solicitors and stewardship said to us, actually, we'd love you, Can, to launch something into this sphere. We'll support and partner with you in this. And we launched churchworkers.net. And churchworkers.net is a annual subscription service where we provide the sort of the next line of consultation or guidance for someone working in a local church to help them meet their HR needs. We've got client churches who are very small, with only 1 or 2 employees. We've got others who've got 25 or 30 on the books, and you know, we are therefore liaising with ops directors, with solo administrators, with vicars and pastors, or with church wardens or other trustees, on a combination of issues, whether it's the sort of proactive looking at what did it look like to do best practice well, so can we train and equip you? Someone going to say, we've had a new person start and I'm really confused as to how to calculate their annual leave and bank holiday, which is always confusing, by the way. Confused by that is always confusing.
Spent time doing that before.
And you know, and then sometimes it's the actually, you know, something's going majorly wrong here, and we'd like you to help us put this right or fix this, either in terms of helping us, you know, work to a way that this person can remain on the staff team and start to flourish. Or sometimes, as we know happens, you know, we're working towards an exit, but we'd like to handle that as well as possible. So that's the sort of
it's great. Now, I think if you're listening as a church and you're thinking, HR is something I need more help with, I need more support with, more confidence with doing, then this is a really good service to sign up. Not only do you have the kind of backup of lawyers who have gone through all of these templates and know this is the right stuff at the right time now, but you've got experienced practitioners who know the industry, who know the church, who know how to best support it. And I think that combination is the thing that comes through, isn't it, that people can sign up for. And you know, if you've got under 5 employees, it's something like £365
£365 it starts with £1 a day.
£1 a day,
which is crazy, really, because I mean, some of the secular services that we've moved to churches from, I mean, they were spending more than that in a month, and if I look at the amount of, you know, of time and benefit that they get from us as a result of it, it's just incomparable, really. But again, you know, as with everything UCAN does, we do it on a not-for-profit basis, and we are hugely blessed by the support of the employment solicitors involved, who, you know, are giving lots of free pro bono time into the scheme and giving us discounted rates on other things. So it's, you know, the basic concept was, can we put together something to do really good bits of work once and help as many people as possible to benefit.
Absolutely right. And so, if you're, you may be part of the Church of England, or you may be part of another network that does get some support. But this would be worth considering. The cost is cheap compared to what you would, contracting a lawyer to do a piece of work on something is going to cost you more than 365 quid. So
For the
definitely,
first hour, probably.
yeah, lawyers, I love it. Yeah, and you're married to a lawyer, so
I am, yes.
she knows all about it. So can't recommend the service enough, and it's great that you kind of been thinking about this and considering this for the last however many years, and have been able to action it. The site, I've been on the site. You can log into the site. You can access materials yourself to download. So you're not always waiting on someone to come back to you. You can take some initiative and start reading through policies. You can pick up the phone, you can get some advice, you can email in, and there are response times, aren't there, for people? And so it is a proper service, and it will bless you, I think, to be part of it, particularly for smaller churches who go, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do. And it is always the case, isn't it? We throw money at it when it goes wrong. And so, the biggest message from this is let's invest into this now. Let's do this whole aspect of policy and life and structure well. People that we employ, it feels very formal to go give people a contract and ask them to read through it and to come back to us and to begin to put together a clear job description and go through the formality of an induction. It does feel a bit like, oh, this is too formal. But when it goes wrong, to having done those steps and having provided the right context with the right information to people, it makes a difference. And it's not easy working at a church, is it? Let's be honest.
No, it isn't. And I was in another consultancy project recently with a church where I was talking with one of their trustees, and their trustee has lots of sort of high-end corporate experience, and that's an amazing gift and skill set to bring to the church. But part of what we were talking through was sort of the dynamic of when someone works for a full-time secular role, even if they're doing 40-50 hours a week, when they then step into the church context, it's a mental shift. And yes, they may be tired, and engaging in all sorts of areas of church life can has its ups and downs, but it's a mental shift. They're in a different place now, and they're there to volunteer, not to work, and they're there to partly receive in that time. It's good for our discipleship. With a church employee, there's far fewer opportunities to mentally shift. Even when they worship on a Sunday, they are constantly spotting things and constantly responding to queries or comments or otherwise, and we need to hold these people appropriately, and value them and thank them, and recognize actually that they are bringing really great skill set, which they could be using in another area of life and being paid a lot more for using it, with often with fewer hours, but actually they've chosen to bring it sacrificially into the church, and it's that sort of real balance of recognizing that working for a church is both a huge privilege. It's wonderful to be in a mission focused, effective context where you're with people you love, working for a church that you love, seeing God do things. That's a great privilege. But equally, that there's a sacrificial element to it as well. And what we don't want to do is add on to the sacrificial element by saying, and by the way, we're not going to do the employment thing very well, because if we can do that really well, then actually we're doing all that we can to love and support these people as they serve us in church.
Yeah, absolutely right. That's great. So we've covered that kind of one side of policy, legal, and contracts, and all of that. Getting the best out of people, then, and what advice and tips have you got for us, for those who might be managing somebody or managing volunteers in particular roles? How do you make me a better person to lead and to manage folk?
It was interesting. When we launched churchworkers.net, the first publication that we wrote, quite a lengthy publication, was a was our best practice guide to being a church employer rather than the employee handbook. The employee handbook, which does exist in the scheme, covers the nuts and bolts, but we actually wanted people to start with what does it look like to be a good employer. So part of that is making sure that people are trained and equipped to do the things that they need to do in terms of line management. And you know, when we do our line management training, we will go through what it looks like to have a line management session, what the balance should be between task and pastoral and sort of well-being, you know, making sure you've got times to pray for the individuals concerned, you know, looking at tone of communication, making sure that emails are warm and not too transactional, all of that sort of side of it. We equally talk to trustees, church trustees, and say, you know, where's the conversation going on about your vision for being an employer? You know, lots of churches will have their church vision, but actually churches as an employer need to have a vision for that. So it's great to get people talking about the conversations. What do you want to be the experience of working for this church? We like to ask church staff members, if you were down the pub on a Thursday night with some non-Christian friends and they said, oh, you know, what's it like working for your church? How would you describe that? And actually, aspirationally, how do you want want that to be? So foundationally developing a vision, and actually we want it to look like this, we want it to feel like this, and then stepping back from that and saying, well, if we want it to look like that, what does it need to, you know, what needs to be in place to make it feel like that is really appropriate. And then I think some sort of basic elements throughout the year, really, you know, and all of this will need to be tailored with the budgets and resources available to churches. My home church really prioritised taking our staff team away for a 3-day retreat once a year. We did that in January. It's a really good opportunity of the year to say, actually, we've given out a lot in the autumn term. We're going into a phase coming up about planning ahead. So we take them away, and that's a combination of prayer, of genuine retreat and silence, but social time together, fun, board games, walks, sports, etc. As part of our plan for developing our team and helping them remain relationally cohesive. Equally, you know, termly training days really important. Finding staff socials throughout the year also massively helpful. Making sure that you follow through with things like termly reviews or annual reviews. Again, sometimes when churches get busy or pressurized, they'll say, oh, they don't want to do that. But actually what's communicated in that is, we don't really care about your development or evaluation. So again, we think we'll give them a break. What the person often hears is, oh, well, I'm not that valued here. So seeing through on all of those sorts of things can really help. And you know, and always I think there's also a sense of making sure that we are aware of the well-being of our team, the pressures they feel. If we're not paying enough, are there financial pressures going on? Do we really want our people to be financially pressurized? If they find it hard to book off their annual leave because it's, you know, it's just too complicated, are they getting overly tired and worn out? Do we really want that to be the case? If every time that they have to do anything remotely HRE, it sort of, you know, fills them with dread because, you know, they think this is going to take far too long, or I'm going to add pressure to someone else who I know is already pressurized, then actually we've slightly robbed them of the reality of what it should be like to be in a good employment situation.
Mate, that's great. Some top tips there of what it is, and we, you know, if you're in a situation where you're as a church administrator not being managed particularly well, then set the example and the staff and volunteers that you manage. I think that's you know the case. You know, you don't need it to change here to do something. You can start with your team and create a culture in your team, and which is a great example. You know, I often have pastors say to me, how did you lead that? How did you gather people together? How did you, you know, envision them? And they all seem to be on the same page. They all seem to have joy and just, you know, love what they're doing. talk to me about that, and those things are so valuable, aren't they? And just having an interest in people, knowing where people are at and how they're doing. We will regularly pray together as a staff team once a week. What can we pray for you? And it's a great time that builds us stronger together, not just in the work, but outside of the work. And there's some real joys, isn't there, of working in the church in that kind of environment. Those are the real blessings that we have, just to come together and do those things where you may not be able to do that in a secular employment. So yeah, lots of things to reflect on there, mate. Very helpful. Before we finish, I know you've got you kind of doing some area training days, and I think there are resources available for pastors to get along to conferences and training. And so if you're a treasurer or you're a trustee or PCC listening to this, portion some time in for UCAN membership, portion some time in for training and sort of professional development. Still needs to happen in our churches with our staff. We want to make them as good as we can. So fill us in on the area training days, mate, and what you're trying to
do. We're going on our road show. We did our first one in Belfast earlier in the year, and then we've had a little break, and we're now rolling out. I think we've got another 12 or 14 venues going to be happening throughout this year. The first one, or the next one, starts a couple of weeks' time, and then they will sort of go through sort of regularly through till September. Got some in the southeast in Surrey and Hertfordshire. We'll be in Bristol, we'll be in South Wales, we'll be in Birmingham, we'll be in Edinburgh,
Nottingham as well. Yeah,
Nottingham's there. Leeds or York. I mean, there's all sorts of going around, and part of that day is called Amplify Your Impact. It looks about effectiveness in our working roles through three lenses. The first being personal effectiveness. How can we do all we can and run our working lives to help us be effective in our roles? Secondly, how can we influence the team that we're part of to make us effective as a team? And the third session is when we look at specific tasks or functions that might be particularly key to what we're trying to do as a church, whether it's volunteer engagement or welcoming and integrating newcomers. How can we approach each of those tasks in the most effective way? So it's a really great syllabus. I'm so looking forward to being out and about with administrators and ops managers and church leaders around the country, coming together to look at those important skills. As the title says, our prayer is that people will go away from those being more impactful in the ministry that they return to.
Yeah, that's great. And so we'll put the stuff on the socials. You don't need to be a UCAN member to come along to these days. Please, sign up. But they're cost effective, I think. We've got a cutting edge conference, haven't we, for UCAN heading in June into London, which is looking forward to a day conference. So again, we'll put these stuff on the socials. Please connect in and take a look at these things. Andy, mate, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for coming on the podcast. I love people who've got passion, and passion for healthy organizations has come across. I certainly feel challenged to go away and reflect and think, how can I do this better? Where do I need to change? And it's been a great conversation. Not coming away thinking, oh, I've got so much, I'm such a failure, but going away thinking, how can we do this better to serve people and for the glory of God? So really looking forward to that, mate. Thanks for your time.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me. It's always great to be here with you.
It's great. And if you've got any other questions or topics or things that you think we need the church office to say something about this or to chat about this, then please get in contact at questions@thechurchoffice.co.uk. We'd love to hear from you, and let us know you're listening to the podcast, and please take the time to pass the pod on, as they say, to somebody else, and to listening to this great church administrating podcast. Mate, thanks a lot, and we'll see you again soon.
See you soon.